Money FM 89.3. Best of breakfast. Morning Shot.
Welcome to Morning Shot. I'm Emaad Akhtar. Now, if you've been out and about over the last couple of weeks, you've probably felt those heavy downpours sweeping across the island. Right now, Singapore is experiencing La Nina conditions, which typically bring cooler and wetter weather. But as we look ahead, the mercury is set to rise, and we're about to transition into the hotter months of the year from April to June. Singapore uses the wet bulb globe temperature to measure heat stress, and that accounts for not just air temperature, but also humidity, wind speed, and solar radiation. According to an interagency Mercury Task Force, there is a lower chance of a heat wave during this year's hot season, but above normal temperatures are still expected. And so they've mapped out a national approach to how various sectors should respond to potential heat wave situations. For more insights, we're joined by Steve Yim, Associate Professor at the Asian School of the Environment and Lee Kong Chian School of Medicine at NTU, and Principal Investigator at the Earth Observatory of Singapore. Steve, good morning.
Good morning.
All right, Singapore is currently experiencing La Nina conditions, which typically bring cooler and wetter weather, but April to June are typically the warmest. Can you explain in lay terms what causes this shift from cooler to warmer temperatures between the months of March and April?
Yeah, because from April to June is a typical period of time we experience the inter-monsoon season change. So the cooling monsoon will become weaker, such that we will experience the warmer temperatures during April to June. This is the normal seasonal change. And when we are experiencing La Nina, that would make the temperature change a little bit weaker and slower. So that's why that would have the temperature changes during the time in this month all the way to June. But we were still getting the higher temperature during the April to June. That is a normal seasonal change.
Yeah, Steve, we understand that because of global warming, March to May temperatures in recent years associated with La Nina are still higher than those associated with the warming El Nino phenomenon 40 years ago. How significant would you say that is?
I would say because when we talk about La Nina and El Nino, they are the lateral variability. So that means even though we do not have the human influence or emissions, so the climate will still change or vary by itself. So for the global warming, the impacts, so that basically shift all our temperature to the higher the level than the past. So given to the climate variability, that change itself with the global warming, looking at the long-term change, the temperature, so we were experiencing more extreme events. So for the warmer heat wave events, we will experience the higher temperature than the past. So this is what we are experiencing now.
Fair enough. Yeah, we understand that authorities have started making plans to help Singaporeans tackle rising temperatures ahead of the hot season in the middle of the year. Now, based on key climatic changes you've observed so far, how likely is it that we will experience a heat wave in the coming months?
I think the chances are still there, because we experienced that 2024 is a hottest year on the record. And La Nina, that even though it's weak, but also bring the temperature a little bit lower, but the La Nina is weak, as I mentioned, and is going to shift to a neutral condition later. So that's why the La Nina cooling effect would disappearing. And during the April and to June is typically the seasons in Singapore here. So I'm looking to the trends that the temperature is going to be higher for the long-term perspective. So this is why we still have some chance that the temperature will still very relatively high.
Yeah, speaking of past trends, Steve, it's previously been reported that Singapore experienced 122 extra days of dangerous heat last year. And just to put things in context, we would only experience 4 such days without climate change. So there's no doubt that climate change is not going away. In fact, it's accelerating. So how escalated could conditions get in the next 5 years?
I think it's just like what I mentioned, that even though we do not have the human activities or the emissions, the temperature still varies by itself. But adding to the global warming effect on top of the changing of the climate. So when we experience the El Nino year, the temperature would become more extreme and higher than the normal, like the El Nino events. So that is why we would likely that if we have the extreme events, our research also show that we will have a more chances that we have the intense and more frequent and longer duration of the heat wave that we could experience.
Yeah, I want to talk about something known as the urban heat island effect, which basically describes how cities tend to be significantly warmer than surrounding rural areas because of the absorption and retention of heat by built environments, particularly during the night. So how does this effect worsen heat waves, do you think, here in Singapore?
I think because of the materials in the urban areas, for example, like concrete, that can absorb the heat very effectively during daytime, but at nighttime it will release the heat very slowly. So that is why in the urban area, especially in downtown, that we have a relatively high temperature than the surrounding rural area. So that is the urban heat island effect. Given the larger scale, the heat phenomenon, on top of the urban heat island effect, that would make the situation even more extreme. So in the downtown area, so we experience the higher temperature than the rural area. So this is what we will experience.
So in those areas where we'd experience more heat, would things like green buildings help combat heat waves?
I think green building, so greening itself would have the function to release the heat faster than the concrete materials of our buildings. So greening is definitely one of the very typical the strategies to mitigate the urban climate issue, especially during the when we are dealing with the heat stress issue. So urban greening is definitely one of the the strategies that we can look for.
Okay, and in your opinion, what role does energy consumption play in worsening or mitigating extreme heat?
Yeah, during the heat events, right, so we would tend to have the higher demand of the energy consumption. So when we experience the heat events, we will have the more chance that we will use more energy, especially for the cooling. So this is why we're looking forward to have more the energy demand that we have to think about how we tackle, especially when we are predicting to have more heat events. So energy consumption will be one of the problem that we have to address.
Right. Now, it has been confirmed that 2024 was the hottest year on record, both in the air and the oceans. Do you think we are underestimating the gradual climatic shifts? Is there perhaps a tipping point which would eventually make the planet less habitable for humans?
I think one of the key things is for public understanding is what is tipping point. So tipping point is a threshold in the climate system. So if we go beyond the threshold, the system cannot reverse back to the normal, the system, what we experience right now. So the tipping point is basically the very critical threshold value that we should pay attention. But nowadays, the understanding of the tipping point is very limited still. So if we go beyond the tipping point, so especially in tropic areas, we will experience a more the extreme heat, the heat stress issue, high humidity that will make the tropics a less livable environment. So that is something that our research is now working very hard to understand and even predict the tipping points in the climate system.
All right, we have been discussing how likely it is that Singapore will experience a heat wave in the coming months with Steve Yim, Associate Professor at the Asian School of the Environment and Lee Kong Chian School of Medicine at NTU. He is also Principal Investigator at the Earth Observatory of Singapore. Steve, thanks for your time and your insights and for joining us today.
Thank you.
Stay with Money FM 89.3.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.